I just wanted to say that actually Christian and I met through Greg and Harry Dubritsky, who you'll be hearing from later. You'll be seeing in the resource list, and Greg can tell you a little bit more if he chooses to, about their program that they've done for a number of years called Alcohol Addiction and the Three Principles. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Thanks, Barbara, and thanks, Beverly, for sharing about the promises. That was actually a big thing for me when I was in AA. Just like reading through those promises, and I don't know, just it's like for the first time in my life, I had a little bit of hope. It's like maybe I can have a sane mind rather than the one that I'm trying to escape all the time. But one of the biggest things that came to me was getting into Bill Wilson's teachings specifically, and reading a lot of his letters that he wrote to people. And his main focus was on the mind. And even on page 23 in the big book, he talked about, how if you never took the first drink or drug, then you would never be off and running. So therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic is in the mind. And that was somebody in AA actually ended up introducing me to Emmett Fox and recommended his book, The Sermon on the Mount. And that was my first introduction to the idea that thoughts had any kind of power, that they would, create our reality. And that it really intrigued me, and I started really looking in that direction. And it was about 3 years later when I came across the three principles. And I went to a local meeting, and this guy, Bob Shell, pulled me aside, and I showed up early, like a good AA person, and ended up waiting 45 minutes for everyone to show up because apparently most meetings people don't show up an hour early. But he pulled me aside, and he just kind of downloaded all this information on me about, these three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought, and how they, how we're creating our own reality moment to moment by our thinking, by what we entertain. And it just, first of all, I thought he was kind of crazy because it seemed too simple, but something really resonated with me at a deeper level. And I really got into it, and just like with AA, where I got into Bill Wilson's teachings, because he was the one who had the main insight that started the whole movement, I really got into Sid's teachings. And I found a lot of similarities between what they were talking about. And Sid has a much more simple way of explaining it, in my opinion, a more thorough way. And what it really comes down to for me, and what I've seen, is that addiction is simply a habitual thought pattern. And I know Amy Johnson talks about it in her little book, A Big Change. And going to meetings and being around people who are like-minded and heading in the same direction is a huge help, and it creates a new pattern. And as we create new patterns, the old ones start to drop off. They just naturally replace each other. And Joe actually wrote in the Serenity Principle, one of the big things that stuck with me in that book, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but said something along the lines of, serenity is our natural state of being when we stop doing the things that take us away from it. And I got to thinking about what that really means. And with Sid's teachings, especially his early ones, he was talking about not giving your energy to the thoughts that you don't want. That's the do nothing part, is just, you didn't have to do anything to make those thoughts appear, and you don't have to do anything to make them disappear. They'll just flow through on their own. There's this natural flow of thought, and that's coming from mind. And we all are in that flow. And through the years, we've trained ourselves to look for certain thoughts and say, oh, that's mine. I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. And when those thoughts pop in, we're like, oh, okay, that's me. And then we start giving that thought energy. So when we change that and we start going to, a fellowship like AA, which, fellowship is very vital in this, and we start changing what we're looking for in those thoughts, and we start looking for more positive thoughts and more useful thoughts that pop up, and give them more attention rather than the ones that we've been giving attention to all along. And that really changed a lot for me. And I ended up spending some time actually just really, really paying attention, being aware of which thoughts I was giving energy to. And also through Emmett Fox, he wrote a pamphlet called The 7-Day Mental Diet. And the idea is you go for an entire week without entertaining a single negative thought. It's not that they don't pop into your head, it's just that you don't pay attention to them. You just kind of let them float by. It's like a noisy car going by. You don't have to run out and tell the people to fix their car. You don't have to tell them to stop and turn it off. You just let them drive by. And eventually the noise will be gone. And it took me like 6 months to get through a week, but I did it, and it really was life-changing. And it just brought attention to how much energy I was putting into thoughts that weren't useful. And instead of that, I started giving more energy to the thoughts that are useful. And that, to me, is a lot of what is happening in the fellowship of AA, is that you have people in there who are sharing their experience, strength, and hope. And through that, you're changing which direction you're looking at. And by doing that, you are allowing yourself to relax into it. Like Joe said in that book, that's our natural state of being. It's when we stop entertaining the thoughts that take us away from that we just return to it. It's like a cork, floating on the water. And if we entertain those negative thoughts, we're pulling it under the water. And all we really have to do to let that cork float back up is just let go. Just let it be what it is. And that cork will naturally float to the top. And then we get fresh air, and we get sunlight, and we get insights. And that's the value of a community like that. And I know we don't really have that yet within the 3 principles that much. There are a few areas with meetings popping up. So it's very useful to have a community like what AA has. As far as I'm aware, there's no other fellowship in the world that is as large as that and as accepting as that. And I did some traveling for work while I was in AA, and traveled much of the northeastern US. And everywhere I went, I'd find a meeting and everybody would welcome me in. And I could, at least spend a couple hours with people in a more positive environment and just get my thinking back into the space where I needed it to be. So there's definitely a huge value in having that kind of community to surround yourself with. And it doesn't have to be AA. A lot of people might find it in a church or, gardening club or anything like that. And I find a lot of relief now in just simple things like going for a walk or going kayaking or woodworking or singing or playing music. All of those things can be essentially acts of meditation, of a way of quieting the mind. Because when I'm playing music and singing, I can't really be thinking of anything else. If I do, I'm going to mess up the song. I'm going to forget the next chord or forget the next verse or something like that. So it really causes me to focus in on that present moment and be more mindful of where I'm at now. And that really helped change those habits and patterns for me. Because from my experience, it doesn't seem like we can directly get rid of a habit. We have to replace it with a new one. Nature abhors a vacuum. And Amy talked about it in the little book, A Big Change, how we have those neural pathways that we've created. And it kind of makes it easier for those thoughts to just travel through whichever ones we choose. And when we create a new path, sometimes while we're creating that new path, we might go back on the old path for a moment. And as long as we don't beat ourselves up over it, it'll be much easier to get back on the new path. And every time we take that new path instead of the old one, we're reinforcing it and essentially making it an easier path to travel. It's just like taking a new path through the woods. The more you take it, the less the weeds and stuff grow up and the easier it is to pass. And the less we entertain the old path, the more it's going to grow in and grow over and become less easy to travel on. So really with the fellowship and with the community of that's a lot of what is happening, is that creation of the new path. And I really believe that a big part of the key is to be gentle with yourself. If you step back on the old path for a moment, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means that you jumped on the old path for a moment. I mean, it's no more than that. You get back to the new one and, move forward. And before you know it, that new one will be the normal way for you. So that's really where I'm at with it, and what I've seen from my experience in working with people. And it was an absolute pleasure to do. It's a little over 3 years running that webinar series with Harry Durbitsky, and the connections that I've made through that, and the insights that I had just sharing that, and it was such a beautiful experience, and it just seemed time to pass it along. And Barbara and Christian are doing an awesome job with kind of carrying on that role. So thank you both very much, and look forward to hearing what everybody else has to say.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah,
Christian,
that was.
You want to say anything here?
Yeah, I was just going to say it was lovely, Greg, and a couple of things that really jumped out for me was when you spoke about the importance of sorry, that was your timer. You stopped.
I had
The
one too.
the importance of being gentle with yourself, and just that I think we talk in this world a lot about recognizing our own innocence and the innocence of others. The people are, and it became very real for me, that idea of people doing the best they can with where they're at, as opposed to just a sort of thing that was said. And I know that you're very gentle with other people, and that you do a great deal of service still. And but that reminded me of another thing, that role of service. You spoke about the insights you had and the learnings you had along the way, and just how important that is, not just from the point of view of giving something, hopefully, or demonstrating something or sharing something with others, but it really is, it always involves seeing more for ourselves, in my experience. And so thanks for all you do, and thanks for a really a lovely share. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
And when we beat ourselves up over things we do, we're just reinforcing the negative behavior. We're giving it more energy. But if we practice self-love and self-care, then we're practicing a more positive energy and a more useful one. And that's what ultimately leads to the freedom. Because it's not really freedom from addiction if you're spending every day fighting it. It should be effortless at some point.
Yeah.
It just becomes the new way. You're not tempted to escape anymore, because you're not filling your head full of all those negative thoughts. You're not reinforcing the behavior that takes you away from your center.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you both. And thanks everybody who helped organize this.